Deadly shooting at a North Georgia high school brought this year's total of mass shootings to 285. 4 people, 2 students and 2 teachers, were killed at Apalachee High School in Winder, Georgia, northeast of Atlanta. According to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the suspected shooter is in custody. Vice President Kamala Harris called today's shooting senseless and said it doesn't have to be this way.
Before I begin, I do want to say a few words about this tragic shooting that took place this morning in Winder, Georgia. We're still gathering information about what happened, but we know that there were multiple fatalities and injuries. And, you know, our hearts are with all the students, the teachers, and their families, of course. And we are grateful to the first responders and the law enforcement that were on the scene. But this is just a senseless tragedy on top of so many senseless tragedies. And it's just outrageous that every day in our country, in the United States of America, that parents have to send their children to school worried about whether or not their child will come home alive. It's senseless. It is, we've got to stop it. And we have to end this epidemic of gun violence in our country once and for all. You know, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. So we will continue, of course, to send our prayers and our thoughts to the families and all those who were affected, including, you know, I'm going off script right now, but listen, I mean, you know, at the last year, I started a college tour. And I traveled our country meeting with our young leaders, right? And so it was college-age young leaders. So I did trade schools, colleges, universities, community colleges. By the way, I love Gen Z. I just love Gen Z. Right? But I'll tell you, one of the things that I asked every time I went to the auditorium, and it would be filled with these young leaders, students, and I'd ask them, raise your hand if at any point between kindergarten and 12th grade you had to endure an active shooter drill. And for the young leaders who are here who are raising their hand, I'm telling you, every time the auditorium was packed and almost every hand went up. You know, a lot of us, I'll speak about myself, you know, we had, well, I grew up in California, earthquake drills, we had fire drills, but our kids are sitting in a classroom where they should be fulfilling their God-given potential, and some part of their big, beautiful brain is concerned about a shooter busting through the door of the classroom. It does not have to be this way. It does not have to be this way. And, you know, this is one of the many issues that's at stake in this election.
Folks, to understand this area, they're represented by Georgia Congressman Mike Collins. He posted this on Twitter. Leanne and I are praying for the victims, their families, and all students at Apalachee High School in Barrow County. We extend our gratitude to law enforcement for their swift action to secure the school and get the shooter in custody. I've spoken with Sheriff Smith and told him my team and I are available to assist in any way necessary. We will continue to monitor and provide updates as prudent. This is the same Mike Collins who released this ad in 2022.
Hey, Mike Collins here, your pro-Trump America First trucker, running for Congress here in Georgia 10. Well, I understand Joe Biden was in town yesterday to talk about our elections. It seems that he and Kamala Harris called anyone who disagreed with the federal hijacking of this election a racist. Well, Joe, I got some news for you. Let me tell you what Georgians really believe. First of all, you count the legal votes that were cast in the state of Georgia, Donald Trump won this state, period. Number 2, get rid of those voting machines. Go back to paper ballots once and for all. Number 3, get rid of those ridiculous drop boxes across this state that the Democrats use to stuff the ballots and steal our elections. Number 4, let's go to national forensic audits in every election cycle across this country. As a matter of fact, it's one of the first bills I'll introduce when I get to Washington. You see, Georgians are sick and tired of weak-kneed, spineless politicians who won't fight for Trump, get to the bottom of 2020, and fix our elections. Well, if they won't do it, Mike Collins will. Send me to Washington. I'll fix this election. I'll get to the bottom of 2020, and I will fight for Trump's America First agenda.
And we wonder why folks shoot up schools, Rebecca.
You know, when I saw this story, I Googled to figure out exactly where was this Winder, Georgia is. And I saw that it's about 50 miles from downtown Atlanta. Just to get a sense of geographically where in Georgia this took place. And even listening to how Vice President Harris was talking about the experience of Gen Z and their experience of having to do these mass shooter drills. And I think we talked about this during the broadcast in Chicago, that one of the things that is a hallmark of the millennial experience, especially people like me, I know y'all say I'm not a millennial, but I'm an elder millennial, is that I remember still being, K through 12 when school shootings went from those, East Coast or West Coast gang shootings to now Paducah, Jonesboro, Littleton, Colorado. When those things start to happen, that was really a big demarcation between what is a millennial versus a Gen Xer. And so now understanding all of the trauma that Gen Z and then even now Gen Alpha is going through because of this country's inability of dealing with this crazed behavior and this gun culture. And, I support people's right to have firearms, but I also know that we still have to put limits around 2A because having folks, and especially these young people who have access to these war machines, these killing machines, to turn around and do these mass shootings. And it used to be like once a year or twice a year, but now for this not to just be monthly, but for it to be weekly. And as it's going towards like a daily happening, at some point, this country has to say enough is enough. And even, I know people have argued and said that, 2A is what protects people from the tyranny of the government. But what we're seeing is that 2A now is making people afraid to be able to live their life, to be able to go to school, to go to work, to go to church. And, finally, enough is enough. And I do think this is now going to become such a critical voting issue. And I think we're going to start to see in different segments of the country where this even transcends partisanship, because when people's close loved ones are getting killed and there isn't an adequate response from our government, that's going to trump red versus blue. And so at some point, we thought Sandy Hook was going to be the tipping point. It was not. But at some point, I think we're going to start to see local officials elected, and they're going to start to be able to run in this particular issue. Like when we see what's happening in Tennessee, if Tennessee's veto-proof supermajority gets busted, it's probably going to be around the gun issue, because that's the issue that's really moving some of these voters who are independents, nonpartisans, or in the middle, because the idea of being shot and killed indiscriminately, it now can happen to anyone. It's not just an inner city problem. It's not just a poverty problem. It's not just a quote unquote Black problem or Hispanic problem, but it is an American problem.
Well, Scott, it's going to take these white women to step up, like we saw this in Tennessee, to change this. Otherwise, you're going to have these shootings in Georgia, in Tennessee, in Texas, and they're going to keep voting for Republicans who do nothing about the problem.
We all know the problem. We got to get it fixed. And I want to talk about, and I want elected officials to start talking about solutions. There are 387 mass shootings in America so far. That's not weekly. That's daily. That's more than one a day, slightly more than one a day. The leading cause for the death of kids and children in this country is now gun violence. And still the NRA exists. And still Republicans don't want reasonable gun control. We forfeited the lives of those children because of our love of the NRA and our love for the Second Amendment, that it is worth killing our most innocent population to keep hold of our guns and to keep hold of the NRA. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves. I'm tired of being tired of these shootings and stuff. We hardly report on them. We haven't even reported on 387 shootings. So, there's blood on all of our hands. We need to do something about it. If with this crisis, wouldn't you want to do something, anything that would stem the tide of gun violence? Even if it was directly or indirectly, you do it, right? I own 10 guns. Robert's not on, probably owns 20 or 30, who knows, right? And yet we're both responsible gun owners. And yet and still, white America, primarily, white America says it's okay, essentially. I'm sorry. Just looking at evidence and empirical data, it's okay to kill our young people.
Yep.
To take our guns and because we love guns and Second Amendment and NRA. Gotta stop, man. And it's not gonna stop. You're gonna report on this next week, and next week, and you're gonna report on police brutality too. Because we have a culture of violence and we don't care.
Indeed. Well, we care, but the question is, will these white conservative folks actually care? All right.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.